For all your medication and narcotic tracking needs, check out the LogRX app, created by career fire and EMS professionals. That's LogRX.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
In the world of firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. That's why for over 2 decades, first responders nationwide have trusted TheFireStore as their go-to source for essential equipment, apparel, and accessories. Visit TheFireStore.com online or in-store today.
Fire Service Data and Tech Talk.
Hey, everybody, it's Eddie Buchanan on fireengineering.com with the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk podcast for November 2024. It's been a heck of a month if you've been following along in the fire service with lots going on, lots of storms, lots of issues around the country that have really challenged fire departments in big ways. And I think this month's episode is really special. I'm calling this show Data and Tech During the Big One, right? So by big one, I mean a disruptive event. So I was in the fire service for 40 years before I retired, and I can think of 4 times where we had what I would call a disruptive event. We had a tornado that came through back in the 90s. We had 2 hurricanes back to back in 03 and 04. And then in 2011, we had a pretty significant to us anyway, earthquake in Virginia that caused some significant damage and took us a few seconds to get oriented. So when I say big event, or disruptive event, what I'm talking about, something that disrupts normal fire department operations. You may or may not know it's coming. It could be in the form of a hurricane where you have some advanced warning and advanced planning. It could be something that you don't see coming, like a earthquake or some sort of other man-made issue that we tend to deal with these days. And then they often tend to involve some sort of long-term recovery. So where it might be state or federal resources that you have to work with to recover for your community once the event is concluded. These are the things I'm talking about. So imagine if you're playing a game of chess and you're going to calls and you're doing the thing and doing your normal routine, and then somebody comes along and flips the chessboard upside down, and you have to try to recover from that. You have to get your pieces back on the board and start figuring out how you can operate going forward. So particularly with, just over the last month, we've had some significant storms. We've had some significant destruction over in the East Coast. I wanted to put together a group of folks that I would call subject matter experts that can share information for every size fire department. This month, I want to talk to every fire department, the big ones, the little ones, and everybody in between, because I think it's on all of us to make sure we're prepared for whatever may come our way over the next, few years. So that's what this focus is about this particular month. It's kind of a special edition, if you will. So I've got some really sharp guests with me. I've got a panel of folks that specialize in common operating picture on a big scale and urban search and rescue and those types of things. So I'll go around the horn. We'll do some quick introductions and we'll go from there. So Jared, you want to kick us off from tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Sure. Hello, my name is Jared Doke, and I'm a program manager with the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation, or NAPSIG. And we support public safety agencies with geospatial tools and technologies. But I spend most of my time supporting the Search and Rescue Common Operating Platform. This platform is designed to help support urban search and rescue during those large events, allows them to collect, analyze, and share data during those big events. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, sir. And over to the West Coast, Chief Topoleski. You're going to give us a little introduction.
Yeah, Jim Topoleski. I oversee wildland and aviation for the county of San Bernardino, which essentially means I oversee our hand crews, our fuel management, heavy equipment program, and aviation assets. I have a long history in working on complex incident management teams or type 1 incident management teams where I've traveled across the country on a host of various emergencies or incidents. So I've been doing this almost 40 years, a little over 40 years, actually.
Welcome to the show, sir. Appreciate you taking the time. And then Chad Beam, who just has recently been promoted to assistant chief over there in South Carolina, man. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chad Beam. I work for South Carolina State Fire Marshal's office. My responsibility here is to oversee our emergency response division. And so that's one Type 1 urban search and rescue team, 5 Type 4 urban search and rescue teams, our statewide helicopter rescue program, and then our statewide mutual aid program for the fire service. So I refer to us as the fun division of State Fire.
Absolutely, man. So we've got a really good mix, right? So that's what I'm really excited about, to hear these different perspectives today. I got East Coast, I got West Coast, I've got a single agency deployment, I've got state level deployment, and then even getting up to the federal types of deployment coordination and those types of things. So we've got a whole ton of experience. Some of these, I know, Chad. Jared, you probably still don't have enough sleep yet, just from being back from deployments and stuff. But the target audience for this message is everybody. So if you're thinking, well, I'm from a small fire department, man, we're out here in a rural area, we don't need to worry about this type 1, 2s, and 3 things. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You absolutely should be paying attention to this. And I kind of wanted to walk through and talk about what fire departments can be doing either before the incident, like now, start preparing now, things you can do that are kind of low tech. And then as you start getting into planning, we'll talk about what kind of data and technology might exist to help with that. Get into the incident. Like this, these are the tools that are available to you, when things start to happen, and then into actual recovery, like things that as you look downrange, that might be useful to you. So that's kind of the lay of the land of where I wanted to go. But I'll just throw it out to the group. You guys tell me, what do you think from your experience in all these different responses? What are the basic things that every fire department should be doing to prepare for whatever may come next? Like, what are the basics? Somebody jump.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in. Honestly, I think if you're looking at it from an incident management common operating picture type of platform or theater, having your people or your personnel trained and able to respond in a cohesive, collective manner and develop relationships with other agencies, whether it's fire to law enforcement to public health or whatever may be going on in your target area, is having those relationships built ahead of time and have personnel trained ahead of time to manage an incident. We can't manage, I work in the largest county in the continental United States, and we can't handle all the incidents and complexities of incidents solely by ourselves. We have to develop our people, and we also have to build relationships with our allied agencies in order to provide a weighted response to whatever that call may be.
I couldn't agree more with Jim. The only reason any type of large incident response is successful is because of relationships. When I go around our state talking to our fire chiefs or across the country and meet colleagues across the country, I always tell them I want to make the friendship before it's needed. The last place I want to meet you for the first time is on the scene of a disaster or a large incident. I'd rather walk up to you and say, "Hey Jim, hey Jared, how's the family? How's everything been? Let's get to work." Instead of doing that tail sniffing initially on a scene, that's just not the right place to do it. And I think relationships make our profession especially go around. That is the single largest key to success.
That's classic, man. That's a soundbite, tail sniffing. That's got to go in some FEMA manual somewhere. But that's exactly what it is, right?
If we could just trademark that, maybe I could retire early.
Jared, what do you think, man? Is there anything you've seen from your point of view?
No, I agree with that. Definitely making those relationships and building them. What we try to do, so we work primarily on the geospatial data kind of side. We like to build what we call geospatial game plans. And so when we meet these people, both operationally and then also on the tech side, we want to know who they are, but also kind of getting it a little bit into the tech side of it. We need to know what kind of data you have available that we could pull in during a major incident, and then make sure everybody has access to any of these platforms we may be using, whether it's usernames and passwords. And we want to get that all set up beforehand, before something goes bad. And then you're trying to do all the administrative stuff during an incident. That's not really the time to be doing that. So in addition to the relationships, it's doing a lot of that admin pre-planning work that we've been successful with.
Look, while you're at it, well, explain what SARCOP is. Give folks like the 3-minute. What the heck is that to somebody who's not familiar with it or ever seen it?
Yeah, so SARCOP is the Search and Rescue Common Operating Platform, and it's essentially a suite of GIS tools that we built out to support urban search and rescue. So most jurisdictions already have access to GIS software like Esri's ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro, different tools like that they may be used for in the assessor's office or land planning, stuff like that. What we've done is we've taken these tools and we've essentially configured them to support urban search and rescue. So when a team deploys, they can use the tools to collect data, analyze it, store it, and share that information across agency and across disciplines. We actually, NAPSG Foundation, we developed SARCOP several years ago under a DHS Science and Technology Directorate project, actually working with Chad in South Carolina, as well as Colorado, all Central Hazards region. And so it kind of started out as a smaller local project, and we've really engaged the community, and it's built by them and for them. And we've just kind of grown over the years, and now all 28 federal FEMA teams, state and regional teams from 28 different states, as well as other local agencies, all can access it during large incidents. And we've really modeled a lot of what we've done after the National Interagency Fire Center, how they kind of have a common data schema and data set that's used across the country. So we've modeled a lot of what we've done on that. So anywhere a team deploys, whether locally or they go out of state as an EMAC resource, anywhere they go, all teams are using the same platform, and it's stood up ready to go 24/7.
So how that would fit with if I'm a fire department in rural America someplace, all of a sudden I'm part of a federally declared disaster. As USAR resources start to come in, I'm going to integrate basically with those resources through SARCOP, right? Like that's kind of the goal is yes. Information I might have locally, we want to find a way to make it available to those USAR resources as they start to deploy, I guess is.
Yes. Yep.
Am I
exactly.
saying that correctly?
Yeah. And as I said, we try to do as much pre-planning as we can. So we work with the states and kind of regional teams to get their teams trained and onboarded and access to the platform before the incident occurs. But no matter what happens anywhere across the country, there's always the smaller local agencies that may not have USAR that end up getting brought into the platform. A good example is during Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, there were several volunteer fire departments that they were out there. They were doing searches along the river and they needed access to the platform. So we quickly onboarded them during the incident so that they could work right alongside the other state USAR agencies and the federal teams that were there. So they were all seeing the same data and being able to coordinate at that level.
Is there a place on the internet or something, or how would, if I'm a fire department listening that may not be familiar with or with have regional or state teams, or maybe I don't know who they are. Is there a place I would go to like get more information, or where would I find resources on that?
Yeah, responsesystem.org/SARCOP is kind of our gateway. There we have access to the real world side. We maintain two different platforms, one for real world use during major incidents that requires a login to access, and you can get in and use it for major incidents. We also have a training sandbox that does not require a login. So if teams are looking to kind of explore what SARCOP is and how it may work, you can go there and you can click on the red button for training, and you can get access to it that way. And then there we also have all our training materials linked out to and other resources that they can learn more, as well as my contact information if they want to reach out and learn more about the platform and how to use it.
Awesome. That's a great resource. Everybody should be checking that out. If you're listening to this, make sure your fire department has tapped that resource to see what's going on. I think that'd be great.
And I might just add, one of the things we've found with supporting all these incidents, this year alone, we've supported almost 100 incidents nationwide with SARCOP. And one of the things we find is people deploy to an incident, they use SARCOP, and they're like, oh, wow, this is great. They go back to their home agency and they're like, I want to use this. How can I use it? Some of the things they want to use it for, like the larger incidents, that's exactly what it's designed for. But they also start thinking outside the box, like, oh, I could map my hydrants with this, and I can do this and that. And it's like, well, you don't need SARCOP necessarily. You just need GIS. And SARCOP's kind of the gateway drug for GIS is the way I see it, because people go home and that's when we want them to start talking to their GIS people, local agencies, so that they can kind of build out GIS for their day-to-day operational needs that they need.
Awesome. I'm going to jump back to relationships real quick. One of the things I noticed just in working with Hanover over the years, when we had disruptive events, the reality of that was about 72 hours before we got any kind of help, right? It's just how it, in spite of what was promised, the reality was we were on our own for a good 72 hours. And even then, the assistance was limited of getting to us. So what's that reality like today? Like, what have you guys seen either on the West Coast with wildfires or, over on the East Coast with the hurricanes lately? Has that reality changed? Is it still that kind of response time, or what's that like? Jim, what do you think? What's it looking like from the wildfire side?
Well, from California, I mean, we're in most areas of California, we're resource rich. So having those data points or tools, that common operating picture available to us, it's pretty robust from the beginning. I think, to capstone on top of the SARCOPS concept, if an agency isn't prepared from a electronic display capturing system, the best thing that they can do is just be able to reconcile the resources or the efforts that they've done on a piece of paper. Just draw a simple map. And when that 72-hour window or whenever help does arrive, you've at least captured something so that your whole operation doesn't stand still, that we can continue to move forward. I think one of the larger issues that we contend with, especially with high winds and when the power lines get knocked down, probably no different than what occurred with Helene or other natural disasters, is that when we lose that cell coverage, that cell deniability, that affects our ability to capture information in the field. So the fire service is definitely transitioning into the satellite Wi-Fi coverage. We're using Starlink pretty robustly now to capture and to keep our system whole as we're moving forward. A point that I go back to the relationship side is there's some agencies with 3 to 4 letter acronyms that are associated with them that when they roll up, there's an immediate, oh my gosh, we don't want to see these guys. They're going to come in here and steal our day. But they're really there to help, and everybody's trying to come in to help. So coming in with that open mind of, we're not going to sniff a dog's rear end or put some liquid on a hydrant, if you will, that we're here, everybody's here to try to help and solve your problem. They might have different ideas, but you have to be open and warm to that idea, and then you come to a consensus in the middle of it. I think that is the very beginning of an entire common operating picture, not only from what you're doing, but what you hope to do, and it's building that internal team to be able to solve that problem. I think that is, I've stepped on a lot of different soil in this country and wondered, man, we're never going to get this going if the people don't have the right headspace to move forward. And so that's really critical. Doesn't matter how big or how small you are as a responding agency, you have to be willing to know that there are people that are here to help.
Absolutely. That's one of my pet peeves. I can say it now that I'm retired. that I know there are chiefs out there or leaders in organizations where they don't talk to their neighbor. They keep it closed inside. They don't work with mutual aid partners. They don't work with external resources at all. It's their shop and that's it. And I will say this to you: it is time for change. If you want to have that attitude, you need to be replaced. We don't have time for that nonsense anymore. So, I think that's an important part for any fire department to hear, that of all ranks, there's no place for that anymore. We have to be working as a team and being open to additional resources and working through things together. I know that, like from in the old days, I like to joke, we work together until you get a major event, and then you get a little bit competitive. Like I remember trying to buy ice and water, after a hurricane when the the extra resources that were supposed to be there were not available, and for whatever reason. And we had to kind of do our own thing to track down water and ice. And we were buying tractor trailer loads of it for Virginia out of Tennessee and having it trucked over. Just calling the Walmart with a credit card and buying a tractor trailer load of water, get it out here, put it on the road. And then, but all of the agencies were doing that in the region. We all started doing that because we didn't have the assistance we needed right immediately. So it was, thank God we had a good working relationship, right? We were taking care of our own, but we were also looking out for the other guy. So if I saw an extra truckload of water someplace, I told my neighbor about it. Hey, they call this guy. He might have something for you. You'll have to have those relationships in place to make things work. Chad, what are you seeing from South Carolina's perspective? Are we still talking 72 hours to where you're on your own, or did things move quicker there?
Yeah, so over the last 6 years, we've done a really good job of we'll call it leaning forward, and I'll speak to hurricanes since that's our biggest threat here. And so we pre-deploy folks now. So we'll roster teams and pre-deploy them before landfall. So as soon as the winds are within safe operating speeds, we can move teams right into affected areas. It's become a best practice for us to essentially, we'll move every South Carolina team and every county level mobilization resource into where a potential threat is. And then as we get in our UMAC teams and our federal partners, we're not having to send them directly where people have been waiting for days. That they already have local resources assigned, and then they're able to, our EMAC and our federal teams are able to come in and go right to work as well. But nobody's waiting 2 to 3 days, for somebody to get there. We're putting them there prior to landfall. And, I think everything ties to a relationship, but just to kind of tag on what we've been talking about, if I put a team in a fire district prior to landfall, that allows them a little time to meet the chief, meet the guys and girls of that department. And then when it's time to go work, it may have only been for 12 hours, but they've already met. And so they can lay out a game plan. They can, hey, we'll be on this channel. Here's a radio, here's a map book for our district, whatever it may be. And that has really become a good way of doing things for us. So we pre-stage a lot, and that way nobody is self-sufficient for 72 hours. If anything, it could be like 12 hours or less. And our initial intention is to make it 0 hours. We want them to have help, and our chiefs have learned really what they need in their areas. So they'll call and go, hey, I need 2 Type 1 boat teams, or I need a Type 3 USAR team, or I know so-and-so county's asking for this. If it's cool with y'all, we'll share that resource. And so we try to have 0 wait for self-sufficient, and it's worked really well over the past couple of years.
Awesome. Jared, do federal resources tend to move in advance like that? I know I see the USAR teams, you see them on social media, like we're off to wherever. Yeah. So I guess they're doing something similar.
Yep. Especially with the hurricanes, when we start seeing them coming, the federal teams, they tend to get pre-positioned somewhere. And as Chad said, when they get into a location, that is a good opportunity for some of that just-in-time training, specifically when it comes to the common operating platforms, because some of the local teams may not know it existed or have access to it beforehand. And having those trained teams in place beforehand allows them time to do some parking lot training while they're waiting for the storm to roll in, get usernames created, and get access to those teams so that when they do deploy out into the field, the local teams can work just as well as the federal teams.
Excellent. That's important to think of that pre-deployment as a training opportunity. I think that's a key piece of that. Getting familiar, sniff some butts, and be ready to deploy. That's great. Let's shift gears. What about events that aren't planned? Like an earthquake is a good example. We went out years ago to do Rescue Systems 2 training up in Anaheim, and we were very fascinated being from the East Coast. How does one get a handle on something when you have a major earthquake like that, or a major event of whatever flavor it might be, where it's sudden and it's kind of like nobody knows anything for a second, right? Like how do you approach that kind of incident in California to try to get your hands or arms around what has happened and what's the scope of the incident?
Well, I'll just use the earthquake for just discussion points. But if we had a significant enough earthquake or an earthquake that caused us to go out and do windshield surveys. So the first thing that we're going to do is, one, assess the facilities that we operate out of to make sure that they're safe for our people or that they're serviceable to remain in service. Then we send our engine companies out, our ambulances, squads, et cetera, to begin windshield surveying their response districts to see what kind of impacts or devastation that may have occurred. And then that's compiled together, and then we start establishing priorities. And then that priority is shifted up from the local EOCs, county EOCs, up to the state EOCs, and that information flows, and then prioritization of resources as mobilization occurs begins to come into play. We have a very robust, like I have mentioned, we have a robust system, but it still depends on the human beings to input the data or exercise the white ink and black paper together as to what they're supposed to do. So it still comes down to the human and adequate training to know what they're supposed to look for and how to prioritize what they're seeing.
So that's make sure I'm explaining windshield surveys correctly. So whether given orders or not, after a major event like that, and you secure your own facility, make sure all is well there, they would kind of, I want to say self-dispatch, but I guess that's what would happen, is get in the truck, let's go ride and see what's the scope of what's out there, right? That's a
Correct.
fair summary. So, and then I think an important piece that was mentioned is the satellite communications, right? So that's one of the first things I've noticed in most of these events that I was a part of was the cell phone coverage was gone like in a hot second. I mean, if you didn't get a phone call or text message out in the first 30 seconds, forget it. So I heard of the Starlink issues, the capabilities of that, watching the storm coverage the last few weeks, and was even looking myself. I was like, that might not be something bad to have at the house, just for my own preparedness. I saw a few other friends of mine that are fire service folks that were doing the same thing, and some actually went ahead and got it to just have it, for when who knows what goes on. So I think those are a couple of big takeaways. Understand what a windshield survey is. If you're, if you're in a fire company or fire department that may be smaller and you're not used to that kind of thing, you can have that as a great training right out of the gate. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to record it, which would lead us to the next kind of question: is what technology is available? What are we doing East Coast, West Coast, and at the federal level for that windshield survey? Is there anything? I mean, obviously we can write it down. What's beyond that? What kind of tech exists for that quick capture? So
we use a couple of products. Obviously, Esri's Field Maps, Esri's AGOL is the base, but not everybody on fire engines, either one has the bandwidth to operate those systems, but at least they can report it. And we're going to start building that template off of the base maps that we currently have. We obviously have target hazards identified through other operating platforms that we utilize, but that's really where it starts. Is when we have a big event, we start capturing the data, tracking the resources, and then start plotting it as data points on those platforms, and then we develop dashboards off of that.
Okay. And Chad, what do you do there in South Carolina? Is there any kind of statewide platform or anything that localities have access to?
So largely for our bigger disasters, of course, SARCOP is our statewide choice. However, our state EMD, Common Operating Platform, it's a system called Palmetto. So it has a damage assessment tool that the emergency managers can use. A lot of times they'll look at SARCOP to see where the most affected areas are and then go in and do the true damage assessment. We have a lot of departments that have built for just their local jurisdictions, whether it's using Quick Capture, Survey 123, mix of both, like Jim was talking about, just different Esri products. But I think the one thing I would love to just reiterate here is and my boss will tell you, the state fire marshal, he'll tell anybody I'm his most expensive employee. If there's a new techie something or a gadget, I want it, and I don't just want one. I need two, because in our business, two is one, one is none. However, as much as I love technology, and I do, it is guaranteed to do one thing, and that's fail. And so I see a lot of people get super dependent on technology, and then when nothing works, they don't have a process to continue forward. And take T cards, for instance. I love a good T card because they don't crash. And if I go off duty, somebody doesn't have to log in to get them, things of that nature. So for whatever platform you use, whatever techie gadget that you use for this, I would say have a process to make sure you can continue forward without it in case something happens. We became very dependent on plumb cases for a long time, and they're great, but they have to have cell service. And when cell service is removed by a hurricane very quickly, Starlink is indeed what you need. And so we super quickly became Starlink users during the last couple storms. And, again, Jim hit that on the head. You have to have that satellite game as well. So I would just say, no matter what you use, have some type of backup plan to make sure that the game can still go. We get super comfortable being dependent on technology, and I'm that guy. I really am. But when it's not there, how do we still operate? How do we still do it? And I think that's where a lot of people fall short. And I'm raising my hand there too, because we had to make some plans on the go real quickly.
And Jared, what advice do you have as far as these incidents spin up and integrating with SARCOP? Is there any top 3 do's and don'ts?
I think like a lot of those, we'll call them windshield surveys. If they are built on like ArcGIS technology, whether it's quick capture, survey 1, 2, 3, field maps, all that data can be shared. And I think that's one thing people kind of lose sight of. It's, they're using survey 1, 2, 3, and I'm using quick capture. Well, no, the data can be moved back and forth, and part of that, those geospatial game plans is establishing those workflows beforehand. So we know that if there's an agency in Southern California, when the earthquake happens, they have pre-planned routes. They're going out, they're using their survey 1, 2, 3 template. We can consume that in SARCOP so that agencies that are responding from out of state can kind of get a picture of what's going on before they even get there. And even with some of the other non-Esri products, a lot of them have APIs that we can tap into and transfer data back and forth. So I think that's kind of one of the main things is it's a lot of the technology we use is very flexible, and being able to share that data back and forth is an important component.
Excellent. If you're a new listener to the show and you're not familiar with when we were talking about Esri and these different applications, I'll tell you the quick cheat sheet of how to find out what's going on with your locality. It's just Google the name of your city or your county or your fire, wherever you live. Google that and put GIS in the search. So put the two together, my county GIS, and see what comes up, right? And if you look, and there'll probably be some maps somewhere in your local government. When you find those maps, look in the lower corner of it, and you might see powered by Esri or something like that, right? So if you see that designation on a map, you've got it. The locality has it. Now you just got to get access to it, right? So that's this. Now you might have to go talk to another department in the locality or something. But the application, that technology does exist in your locality if you look at it that way. So that's kind of the quick cheat sheet of where to go start if you have no idea. But it's important to get those plans in place and understand how the data can interface in advance, how the connectivity will work in an outage, all really, really key points. One of the things that I know I experienced, and I'm sure the folks down in North Carolina are dealing with now, and I think it's often overlooked in emergency planning. What advice do you have for firefighters that may be involved in an incident like these big ones, where they're deployed for an extended period of time? What advice do you have for them to take care of their family? Because that's often overlooked. Like what should a person, if you're a firefighter, what should you do to make sure your home is prepared, your family is prepared before one of these things happen, and you might even get a chance to call your spouse? it might kick off so quick. They've got to be able to pick it up and take care of themselves. Any advice from the panel on how to prepare for such a thing?
Yeah, I'll throw in. At my home, my wife's highly independent. Obviously, if she wasn't, we'd be probably split decades ago. But she knows, so do the kids, those that still live at home, where there's emergency supplies. We have MREs at the house, 25 gallons of water that we have stored in the event that something goes wrong. We have lighting capabilities, whether it's solar or battery powered, just to provide that rustic camping approach inside our home. Here in our county, there's a policy throughout the entire county that if your family's affected, they can go to the nearest fire station to seek assistance. Obviously, that does beget some issues because the public is going to want to do the same thing. It's a common gathering point that's known in most neighborhoods or in jurisdictions. So those are good locations to go. They just won't be able to support hundreds of people out of a single neighborhood fire station. But most importantly, it's a place where information can be provided.
Yeah, I would agree. I'll tell you a personal story for Helene. I live up in the upstate of South Carolina, so normally we're not affected by by any tropical systems other than rain. But this time, the tropical system came right through where I live. My house actually got sarcopped, which was kind of cool because I spent so many years working on sarcop, and now my house is on there. And I don't know if it needed to be, but the boys made sure it got sarcopped. But one thing I did as soon as this storm was over is I went and bought a whole home generator because if our power is going to be out that long, more than likely, I'm going to work. And so I just went ahead and kind of bit the bullet on that to make sure I have a 6 and a 9-year-old daughter, make sure my family's, taken care of when I'm gone for things like that because we were out of power for quite some time this go around. But, if home's not good, a lot of times it affects the operations downrange. And one thing we do as a team, we're getting much better at now, is we're sending emails every day to our family members for the deployed members of the teams, checking in, making sure they're good. We have a ton of sponsoring agency fire departments that sponsor folks on the team. And those chiefs are calling the wives or the husbands or the whoever's every day and just going, hey, checking in, does your fence need mending? Does the grass need cut? Whatever it may be, which I think is just really cool, and it just exemplifies the brotherhood and sisterhood of the fire service. But I'll tell you, like if your team members are not squared away at home to go down range, they're not going to be 100%, and there's a lot of people depending on them being 100%. So I just before you go out the door, no matter wildland, hurricane, whatever it is, just making sure things are kind of buttoned up at home. That's huge, and making sure you have that support network back that an agency can help sponsor, much like Jim's talking about the policies for the families to go to the local fire stations. That's amazing. Just having things of that. And a lot of times you think, well, that's not important, or we don't need that, but it could affect your most important resource of your team, and that's your humans. So you got to make sure everything's buttoned up.
One thing I might add is most jurisdictions have some sort of alert notification system. And I think it's always a good idea to make sure everyone in your family signed up for that. When we moved about 4 years ago, and once we got here, I took my wife's phone and signed her up for it. So there was no excuse. So if anything happened in the area, whether we were affected by wildfire, needed to evacuate or something, she was getting the alerts and notifications.
Yeah, information seems to be an important link, right? That at a minimum, sharing what's going on with the families, whether it be the common operating picture to what you would need to know about the locality, and then what their loved ones doing. Where are they, and how is everybody okay and safe? That's great advice, and I think, like I said, it's often overlooked, but again, something every fire department should be thinking about. Develop those plans, figure out how you want to do it. It's obviously appropriate to the scale of your agency, but it's certainly something to talk about. Something that in the Richmond, Virginia region, we're really good at, have become really good at it for lots of unfortunate reasons. I'm sad to say, but where we can literally assume the operations of the other fire department. Where we've had line of duty deaths and things occur where we can pretty much take another fire department offline if we had to, because of those advanced working relationships that we built over the years. We've certainly done that when Lieutenant Clark was killed out here in Hanover, where I used to work. We took a whole battalion out for the most part, right on the spot, and another fire department stepped in and just ran the operation. So it was those things are critical. You don't pull that off on the fly. You certainly do not. What as we've kind of been moving from the beginning of the pre-planning for the incident into the incident starting to occur at the peak of the incident, kind of shift to how is this information that we gather through whatever means it is, how does it play into the recovery of the community and the fire department itself? Like, how does all that information translate into trying to find something normal after the fact? What are the important parts?
We exercise our system pretty routinely, but one that really comes to mind, we called it Snowmageddon. We had a severe snowstorm come and impact our mountain communities and shut down the mountain areas for over 2 weeks. We failed, but that's the learning point. We failed initially at providing a common operating picture that faced forward for the community to see. So if we didn't control the narrative, we lost control of the narrative, quite honestly. By losing control of the narrative of what's going on, the efforts that are being expended to bring stability to those regions, the community will fill that void with, it's been said, with a lack of leadership, someone will step up and provide it. And so we want to be one to systemically run that operation smoothly, cohesively, but most importantly, collaboratively with the community and our responders. But if we don't control the narrative and provide forward-facing information, then it falls apart. When we eventually got it brought back together, we were able to display the progress through the electronic dashboards that the community could see where the crews were working, the progress of the roads opening. They were able to report through social media or web-based application where they had problems. And then that would trigger a response from either sheriffs, ourselves, or law enforcement ourselves, or community members. So it became very coordinated at that point by just being able to provide accurate and timely information to the communities that we are serving.
Jared, is there any forward-facing community? Do you have some sort of dashboarding that you do for your operations at SARCOP that's forward-facing like that?
Yeah, we have several different dashboards gauged toward different audiences within the response phase of it, and so we have what we call a tactical dashboard, which is kind of for the task force level. We have a strategic dashboard, which is kind of for the incident support team level. Then we have one called external dashboard, which is for mostly emergency managers. It has basically all the information minus human interactions, and kind of really where that helps transition into recovery is in that external dashboard, but then also the data itself we can share. The USAR professionals that are out, their primary focus is life safety, but as they're doing some of those prolonged searches, they can document damage observations. And so they're able to document where places that have really been affected along with photos of that. And that can really help jumpstart the initial damage assessment process. And we like to say that SARCOP not only helps save lives, but sustain lives and helping people get back in their houses faster. And I think Chad can probably talk from his perspective a little bit about how that data is used.
Yeah, so I think it's a simple equation. Data is knowledge, and knowledge is power. And so when you can put all of the decision makers in one room and show them these dashboards like Jared's talking about, for me, I serve as the operations section chief for our incident support team. We have a state incident support team, just like the 3 federal ISTs. And when I can put all of the elected officials all the way up to folks, from the governor's office or the governor, and show them this data in one place, it's really easy to make decisions and get resources moving instead of making 52 different phone calls or sending 36 different emails based off of data. When I can pull everybody into one room, show a dashboard, and literally get up there and give my best weatherman, point at a picture and talk about it, it has changed literally the way we operate in urban search and rescue. As an ops section chief, I'm always, do I need more resources or do I need to cut resources? It's always a game of playing that. If I'm just being honest, it has a financial figure to it as well, because if you're holding teams that you don't need, you're still paying for them. And it is easy as looking at our dashboard, especially when we overlay imagery. If there's really bad images and not enough dots, I order more dots. That's USAR teams, right? And if there's really bad imagery and there's too many dots, I can start cutting some teams loose or moving them to another place. It's literally transitioned our response into a lot less of a guess and way more of a science, which I think at the end of the day benefits everybody.
So this information becomes strategic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, the point that he was just making is so critical. The policymakers or the administrators, if we can't keep them sped up, they're going to give us more tasks to do, because they're going to get pounded by the public or their constituency for us to do things. And if we can't provide that accurate, clean information on progress, problems, and results, we just get bogged down with chasing butterflies all over the countryside without a strategic approach to it. So having those dashboards, SARCOPS is phenomenal, because we integrate it through the API into the Esri platforms, and we provide both forward-facing and rear-facing. The rear-facing is for policy and decision-making. The forward-facing is for the public to digest what we're providing. But that information, at the end of the day, while it doesn't seem super sexy to the guys and gals performing the work, it's keeping more work from being spun up on them as the constituency pounds on the politicians to get things done. So by having that information accurate, displayed appropriately, it solves so many problems for us.
And one thing I might add is we often look at, okay, what can the data help us with this incident, making decisions for this incident. But also after the incident's over, because we've collected all of that data, we can go back and start analyzing it and seeing how it can be used on future incidents. So with SARCOP, we now have 3 years of USAR incidents across the country, and we're starting to go in and look at it and say, okay, we had a hurricane. These were the roughly type of damage. Let's look at one squad. How many homes were one squad able to cover during a primary search? Later in the incident, how many were they able to cover in a secondary search in one operational period? That helps us start getting metrics for kind of building up, okay, so in the future when we have a hurricane, if it's this bad, how many resources are we going to need to be able to cover X amount of structures based on modeling that have been affected? So it can really help us kind of fine tune operations for future incidents as well.
That's really critical stuff. It's interesting to think of that information, whether it be from a public information officer or just traditional data collection and visualization, becomes a strategic part of the operation, right? You're using that information to deflect work. The public has a knack for misinterpreting priorities and what's a real emergency. And, so what's an emergency, I can't believe this house fell down. You must go there now. Well, there's nobody in that house and the house is fine. We'll come back to it later. Those types of things. So that's a key part. Where does the PIO fit? Do you have any advice for public information officers that, they're going from just doing pub eds at the school to, maybe once on occasion there's a house fire or something, or a barn fire or whatever. What advice do you have for a PIO that may or may not have that kind of formal training? Just like the 2-minute, here we go advice for somebody like that. Is there any, what does somebody do when they find themselves in that situation?
Social media is what kills us. If I wasn't at Helene, but I can tell you, reading the social media posts coming into California from there, I'm surprised that anybody was able to tie their shoes if you were to base it on those reports. Well, I realize that that is not the case from having been in those types of situations. We have to control the narrative, and that narrative has to be forward-facing, either social media platforms, community engagement through sandwich boards, PIOs in the field, providing accurate information. As mentioned, if we do not provide that information, they make it up themselves, and it's usually never favorable on our side. And it's unfortunate for the guys and girls out there doing the work, because it becomes very disheartening for them, is that they're doing amazing things out there. They're coming up on the fly, doing things that, they're adapting, improvising, and overcoming. And when they see the public's response to the efforts, not knowing everything going on, it's really disheartening to them. So getting that information out on a host of platforms, either social media, sandwich boards, walking into the communities and conveying accurate information, community meetings are key to providing success.
I'd say establishing that relationship, and I know we've used that word ad nausea, but we could do 5 hours of a podcast on relationships. But having that relationship with your PIO is imperative. Our PIO is absolutely phenomenal. Every email I send to our USAR teams in the state, every email I send to our mobilization coordinators, she gets as well. And so she never has to catch up on information. She gets it in real time. She's part of our incident support team as the PIO. She's had all the training, just making sure that they understand what needs to be reported and how it needs to be reported. And she can take the information and run with it. So every day she can walk right over and look at the SARCOP dashboard, and she knows what numbers to pull, what numbers our governor's office needs for their press conference, and then what she can push out. I would say establishing really solid rules of engagement for your teams that are deployed. And so our USAR teams know exactly, if they get a cool picture of a rescue or something, they know what it can't have in the picture. They know, if they submit a picture with a guy in a helmet, but he doesn't have his chin strap, that can't go out. We know that. Your safety person almost becomes a backup PIO, right? And but we establish really solid rules of engagement at the beginning, and they all forward pictures to her, and she gets them out. And when we went to North Carolina, so we did 9 days of Helene in South Carolina, finished up and got deployed to North Carolina, we actually deployed her with the team for the first time. And she was able to tell the story of the team members while they were deployed. And, that's important for like their chiefs that sponsor them and family members that they're always leaving. But it's because we've established the position of PIO as a very important position for us. And it's no longer somebody that we catch up. It's somebody that gets the information as we get it. And they're trained to scrub out what they need to in order to release it to the public or whatever they need to do with it. But just having a relationship with not only your PIO, but your local news folks as well. If they know you by first name, they're probably a lot less likely, or a lot more likely to call you before they run a story to ensure it's factual and things of that nature. All goes back to the horror word that we've been beaten up pretty good.
And kind of to add on to that, I think having the data collection and common operating platforms, it's a system of record, more or less, and it can really help combat that dis and misinformation that we've been seeing a lot in some of these incidents, as we talked about, saying that, I started seeing on Twitter, FEMA hasn't been here, or teams haven't been here in 3 weeks, and I could pull it up and say, well, we have been, and just being able to communicate with the PIOs and the incident to help relay that information to the public that, yes, we've been there. We were there a week ago. We did a complete primary and secondary search on the area and didn't find anything. I think that we haven't directly used it like that, but I do think it's a possibility that we could help kind of combat that disinformation.
Information is strategic, for sure. So data always eventually turns into dollars. So how does what are the important things, like just from the couple of hurricanes I worked? I know we worked on that from the business side of the house for years, recovering whatever we could in operational expenses. How do you guys recommend using technology to capture, because this is going to become a process that you will be a part of for a long time. So what advice do you have as we transition from response to recovery? How's that data and tech going to play a role in that?
I think data, Jared hit it on the head where he said it can almost serve as a system of record. I think that's really important. But data, especially recent data, will really help you plan and recover because you're not taking a swipe in the dark at it. You have hard, factual data. If you can take that and put it into charts and maps and things of that nature, those are powerful, especially when you're going for the recovery aspect. Everybody wants the reimbursement piece. Reimbursement is potentially the dirtiest word I know, and it's because it's part of my job, and I hate everything about it. But it's important. It's incredibly important, right? And reimbursement's hard to even get in the recovery phase without the proper data. Anything from a 214 all the way to our SARCOB data and everything that lives in between. And so I think the more that you're willing to accept, technology and things of that nature, I think it may make the process a little easier. There's a process to everything. I think we'd all agree with, and there's probably people that will hear me say that and they won't believe I said that because, back in the day, as a young fireman and paramedic, you don't want to admit to any process. You just want to go out there and hard charge. But if you can follow the process, whatever it's set forth, but provide data with it, it really does help, facilitate any aspect of the response. Recovery starts on day one, whether you want to admit it or not. But if you don't properly document for when it is time to flip that recovery switch, it's very doable to still get everything together, but it's a lot harder. You could take literally weeks and months off of your calendar if you don't properly document the response for that recovery aspect. The data aspect, man, it's huge. But one thing to remember with that is good data in, good data out. And that really becomes important in the recovery phase.
From the cost perspective, as mentioned, recovery starts at the moment that call goes out. But if you're going to be working in this environment, you have to establish the parameters of the cost at the beginning of the incident. You have to figure out, granted, there will be some pieces that fill in later, but how is all this going to be paid for? We don't send fire resources to Northern California unless we know there's some sort of reimbursement mechanism coming back to us. So having that very hard discussion up front about who's paying for it, is it what you order, you pay, acres burned, cost apportionment, percentage of effort, however you do that, whatever that base foundation is, then that's where the data comes into play, because then you start breaking it up onto the maps or the display and looking at those data points and saying, is jurisdiction X, why are they paying for the resources in jurisdiction Y? So that information is much more digestible if that discussion was had up front, and two, if you're able to track it accurately and reconcile those costs associated. Ultimately, that's going to transition into the state declarations, the emergency declarations, FMAG, or whatever it may be, to get those costs back.
That's just tremendous advice. That was some of the most painful stuff that I had to deal with, over the couple of events that we worked. They're probably still doing it, of trying to resolve recovery of some of those expenses. So that's certainly a key part of that. So we've talked about before preparing prior to the incident, during the incident, and kind of got into recovery post-incident. What advice, just kind of to wrap things up, what advice would each of you give a firefighter, maybe a lieutenant, captain, battalion chief sitting in the middle, or fire chief for that matter? What advice would you give them to close out on what they should be preparing for based on what we've seen in the last couple of years?
I would say never discount yourself as the event taking place there, right? I think a lot of people, that you see these events on the news and you'll think, hey, that's never going to happen here. We're not a big city. We're not a big town. That'll never happen here. And I assure you it will. There's always a large incident coming to you, to a town near you. And I think the scale of large, it depends on where you are. If you are FDNY, it's going to be a much larger incident that taxes their system. But if you go to a 16-member all-volunteer fire department with not a lot of resources, it's going to take a much smaller incident to tax everything they have. And you have to always be prepared for the unknowns, right? Never write any incident off. I promise you, some form or fashion, it's going to happen. So simply take the time to be prepared for the what ifs. That's our profession is based a lot around that. And I would just say, make sure you have those relationships. Make sure you know who to call. And for every phone number that you have in your phone as a battalion chief, a lieutenant, a captain, a fire chief, 3 or 4 other people in your department should have that same number. Because who knows if you're on a cruise that week and you don't have access and they need that number. Never make anything about your job solely dependent on just you. Make sure there's a team or a network that can step in and keep it going. That would be my 30,000-foot view advice.
All I could do is say he's spot on. Is having a succession plan, even while you're still working, is critical. And we're experiencing that. We complain a lot about the new generation not wanting to engage and do things, but if we're not bringing them into the discussion to train them up, then truly what we're failing is ourselves and those that pay us our salaries.
I think kind of talking about that younger generation is someone coming from the perspective of kind of the tech side and the common operating platforms. Those younger folks, those are the ones that know how to operate the technology, and those are the ones you really want to bring in and kind of bring them under your wing and kind of give them some ownership of it. Like, you're the small team of SARCOP experts in your department. Take that, own it, and train everyone else up on that.
Well, guys, I can't thank you enough. This has been some incredible information that I hope the fire service will get a chance to hear. It is certainly timely, and I want to express my personal thanks for all of you, 3 of you, have done to these incredible incidents we've seen as of late. I appreciate your leadership and your willingness to share the best practices and how we can make every fire department in the United States just a little bit better. Just, to be ready to handle the next train derailment in Ohio or whatever the thing is, to be prepared to handle the next thing. So I thank you for your time and your efforts today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk. Be sure to share this with folks. I think this is timely information that everybody needs to hear. We'll be back next month on fireengineering.com and all the social media platforms. If you want to reach out to me with show ideas, or you're doing something cool with data and technology in your department, you can find me on Twitter at EddieB676. We have a Data and Tech Talk handle on Twitter as well. And I'm also over on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can find me through all the socials. I'm always happy to provide what information we can. So I hope everybody has a good November, and we'll see you next month. Everybody be safe.
For all your medication and narcotic tracking needs, check out the LogRX app, created by career fire and EMS professionals. That's LogRX.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
In the world of firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. That's why for over 2 decades, first responders nationwide have trusted TheFireStore as their go-to source for essential equipment, apparel, and accessories. Visit TheFireStore.com online